book lovers, and welcome back to the Book Club Lounge. We're fired up and ready to dive into another incredible book, so thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, follow us, you name it. It's the best way to make sure you never miss out. Trust me, you're going to have fun here.
And of course, you'd want to turn on notifications so that our lovely voices graciously interrupt your day whenever there's something new to discuss. Good plan, yes?
Oh, Elliot, what a charmer, but let's get to it. So today we're cracking open Abby Jimenez's The Fall Risk. It's this delightfully witty, short story romance that's heating up. And spoiler alert.
Yes, quite literally spoiler alert. We'll be discussing everything from the first meet cute to the, well, let's just say the juiciest bits. Proceed at your own peril if you've not read it yet.
Exactly. And for those of you still here, get comfy. This one's a little relatable, a little heartwarming, and totally laugh out loud funny. It's got emotional support bear spray and arborists. What more could you want?
Or possibly a hint of realism amidst the humour. I mean, it's not everyday stares vanish into thin air, leaving two strangers stuck together over Valentine's Day. That's, quite the setup.
Pfft. Yeah, okay, Mr. Logic over here. But honestly, that's part of why it works. It's quirky. And Abby Jimenez manages to take this whole off-the-wall premise and make it feel real. So, fair warning, we're diving right into the plot, spoilers and all, because we're breaking this one down completely. Before we dive into the plot, let's take a moment to talk about the genius behind it, Abby Jimenez. If this name doesn't ring a bell, you either don't read romance or you've been living under a rock.
Well, or you could simply not yet be familiar with her particular style. Not everyone follows the latest rom-com bestsellers, Clara.
Fine. But you should, because Abby Jimenez is like the reigning queen of contemporary romance right now. You've got laughs, emotional gut punches, awkward moments, that delightful cocktail of this is life but cuter.
Agreed. It's a fascinating blend. She's even managed to bring humour into situations that could otherwise feel heavy. Like in The Fall Risk, where the protagonist is grappling with both a stalker and newfound isolation. The humour doesn't undercut the tension, it complements it, giving readers something to grasp onto.
Right? And what makes Abby stand out is how she has this knack for nailing emotional authenticity while also keeping things ridiculously fun. She's also the mastermind behind Just for the Summer and yours truly, two absolute fan favorites. Oh, and she won a Good Morning America book club pick too. Not a bad resume, huh?
It's certainly impressive. But I think what drives her success, particularly in The Fall Risk, is this perfect balance. Take Seth, for example, a recently divorced arborist. There's real grief woven into his character, but it's approached with such care that it doesn't overwhelm the story. Instead, it strengthens the romantic arc with Charlotte.
And let's not forget the readers absolutely adore her for this. I was reading customer reviews and people couldn't stop raving about the humor, the wit, and those hilarious one-liners.
Yes, I believe one review mentioned something like, hilarious in the most romantic way. A rather apt description. Apparently, even the pun-filled dialogue, heavily inspired by Seth's love of trees no less, was a running highlight.
Tree puns. Seth had, an 8-pack of abs and corny humor? I mean, come on, how is that even fair?
Ah, the quintessential rom-com male lead. Though I must say, Jimenez still managed to imbue him with depth. Perhaps that's why readers connect with her stories. It's escapism with a heartbeat.
Totally. It's that emotional punch combined with these laugh-out-loud moments. Also, bear spray? Genius. It's that mix of hyper-specific quirks that make her characters so unforgettable. Oh, and apparently, Seth gives tree care classes to retirees. Why isn't this man real?
Indeed. There's also irony, isn't there? Seth is completely comfortable at great heights trimming trees. Yet, emotionally, he struggles to trust. It's almost poetic.
See, this is why Abby Jimenez is unparalleled. She gives you characters you weirdly want to spend time with. Even for something as short as 82 pages, readers said this novella left such a strong impact. One review even wished for 250 more pages.
It's not surprising, really. And just to put a spotlight on the emotional stakes, what do you think about the role Charlotte's trust issues played in creating that slow unravel toward romance? Particularly the way Abby unfolded those layers within such limited space to write.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But let's pause on the plot breakdown for now. I know we're going to dive into their dynamic in the next chapter. This was just the appetizer, folks. Stick around because next up, it's all about Seth and Charlotte. Forced proximity, epic banter, and all. So, as promised, let's talk Seth and Charlotte. Their meet cute, or should I say meet chaos, is exactly the kind of forced proximity situation we dream about in rom-coms. Picture this. Two strangers, Valentine's weekend, and they're suddenly stuck on their apartment landing because their stairs completely gone. Seriously, Elliot, how does something that absurdly perfect even happen?
A construction mishap, apparently. Absurd, yes, but it's a brilliant setup for a story. It creates the perfect storm of forced proximity. Neither of them can go anywhere, so they're left with no choice but to interact. And really, it's within that shared vulnerability that the story finds its heart.
Ugh, yes, and the way Charlotte's all, keep your distance, I've got bear spray. I mean, iconic. She's so guarded, and yet she's this gorgeous mix of strength and, fear. You can tell she's been through some stuff.
Precisely. The bear spray wasn't just comic relief. It symbolised her fight to control her own safety after the trauma of being stalked. Meanwhile, there's Seth, who's dealing with his own emotional baggage. Freshly divorced, a self-proclaimed fall risk, if you will.
Oh, the wordplay. It's so good. And don't forget his job as an arborist. Like, heights? No problem for this guy. Emotional vulnerability? That's the real climb. It's those little details that make these characters feel so real and weirdly relatable.
Indeed. Seth's tree care expertise adds a metaphorical layer. His understanding of roots and growth mirrors his personal struggle to rebuild trust and connection. And yet he's rather disarming with his humour, isn't he?
Oh, totally. Like, when he starts cracking those tree puns, you just know he's trying to diffuse the awkwardness. It's charming in that I shouldn't find this funny, but I do kind of way. What I loved, though, was how Charlotte started softening because of it. It wasn't forced or rushed, it just happened naturally.
That's a testament to Jimenez's skill, really. The chemistry between them develops organically, even in such a confined setting. Their initial standoffishness makes way for curiosity, and eventually a sense of camaraderie. It's subtle but extremely effective.
Yeah, and it's like you root for them right away. Pun intended. But all jokes aside, the way Jimenez builds these moments, like tiny puzzle pieces coming together, just makes their connection feel so authentic.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how the premise, essentially trapping them together, forces them to confront their personal insecurities and preconceived notions. It's as though the absence of an escape route mirrors the way they eventually allow their walls to come down.
Right? It's like the universe is giving them a giant shove and saying, deal with it. I loved how Charlotte starts to see Seth for who he really is under all the dad jokes, and Seth, well, he sees her strength, even though she doesn't see it herself. Ugh, it's so good. So, after the universe practically shoved Charlotte and Seth together, we saw their connection unfold so naturally. But it's not just about their charming banter or those laugh-out-loud moments, Elliot. Underneath it all, this is truly a story about trust, which, let's be real, might just be the hardest thing to rebuild once it's been broken.
Completely agree. And what strikes me is how both characters are, in their own ways, navigating this perplexing terrain of trust. Charlotte is hyper-aware, on guard after her stalking experience. Every interaction with Seth initially feels like a deliberate calculation of risk versus safety, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And you can't even fault her for it. She's carrying around this invisible armor. But then here comes Seth with his tree metaphors and goofy one-liners, and he's chipping away at that armor. Slowly but surely. It's kind of beautiful how it happens.
Yes, and Seth's own backstory adds additional texture. He's only just been divorced, and that is a monumental fracture in trust, an emotional earthquake that leaves him doubtful about relationships altogether. And yet, despite those hesitations, there's something about Charlotte that pulls him in.
Right? It's like he's the guy who's all about trees and roots, but trust? That's his unsteady ground. And yet he keeps showing up for her. That scene where he shares that he likes taking care of her? Ugh, be still my heart.
Indeed, it's a subtle but meaningful moment. His willingness to admit that he finds value in being needed hints at how he's attempting to rebuild his sense of purpose, post-divorce. Meanwhile, Charlotte begins to see that perhaps not every vulnerability will be exploited. That particular shift in her perspective is incredibly moving.
Exactly. And the best part, it doesn't feel heavy-handed. Like, even as they're breaking down these massive emotional walls, Abby Jimenez sprinkles in the humor so it never gets too overwhelming. It's what makes this novella so real, you know? The laughter sits right next to the pain.
True. That balance is delicate, but Jimenez pulls it off with finesse. Even the lighter moments, like Seth's tree jokes, serve a dual purpose. Yes, comic relief, but also as a reminder of how small joys can coexist with larger challenges.
Oh, and let's not forget the bear spray. I keep coming back to it because it's hilarious, but also a raw symbol of how much Charlotte's been through. It's this goofy, over-the-top thing, and yet it's so heartbreakingly human at the same time.
Absolutely. It epitomizes her dual nature, guarded and fearful, yet resourceful and resilient. And Seth's respectful patience with her, acknowledging her past trauma without trying to rush her healing process, cements his role as a grounding presence in her journey.
Ugh, I couldn't agree more. It's like, when characters are written with this much emotional depth, you can't help but root for them. I mean, I was practically yelling at the book, just trust him already. But it's not just about romance, it's about healing. I think that's what makes their journey so impactful.
Precisely. The romance is almost secondary to their self-discoveries. These characters convert their physical confinement into an emotional refuge, a rare instance where being trapped brings liberation rather than fear.
Yes. And honestly, I'm obsessed. But okay, I'll stop gushing for now because we're only halfway through this. There's so much more to unpack, and I know you're dying to dive into the next chapter of their unfolding connection. Take us there, Eliott. Exactly, Eliott. That balance between confinement and liberation is something Jimenez handles so beautifully. And speaking of balance, this is where Seth and Charlotte really start shifting their focus. It's no longer just about breaking barriers. Now it's about learning how to build bridges. You see it happening, right?
Indeed. The tone shifts quite remarkably. By this point in the story, they're no longer strangers trapped by external circumstances, but partners who are willingly redefining their worlds with each other in mind. It's a delicate yet profound transition.
Totally. Charlotte especially feels like she's stepping into something scary and new, but she's tentative, right? Like, she's thinking, okay, maybe I don't need the emotional equivalent of bear spray anymore. That's huge for her.
Yes, and it's notable how Seth's unwavering patience catalyzes that shift. He embraces her cautious steps forward without attempting to accelerate the pace. His consistent reassurance, paired with self-deprecating humour, serves as a foundation of safety for her.
He's just so steady, you know? It's like he's saying, I'll be here when you're ready. Honestly, swoon. If this guy isn't an emotional support arborist, I don't know what is.
An excellent observation. And yet, the significance of their respective growth extends beyond the romance itself. It's about two individuals beginning to imagine futures they believed were no longer available to them. For Seth, it's finding joy beyond the wreckage of his marriage. For Charlotte, it's daring to trust again.
And it's messy, right? Like they're fumbling through it. But that's what makes it real. Charlotte learning to loosen her grip on fear. Seth figuring out how to just exist in the moment without overthinking everything. It's beautiful chaos.
Precisely. That unpolished quality reflects life's complexities. Relationships, especially under such peculiar circumstances, are rarely tidy. Jimenez doesn't present a fairy tale, but rather something that feels earnest and achievable.
Oh, totally. And you can tell Charlotte's really trying to let go of that what-if thinking. Like, what if it doesn't work out? What if this is too good to be true? Seth's response? Basically, let's find out together. Gah, poetic.
It's refreshing. His approach is a stark contrast to her previous experiences, which were steeped in fear and doubt. He becomes more than a romantic partner. He's an advocate for the life she's been too afraid to reclaim for herself.
Okay. But let's not polish that halo too much, Eliott. Seth, for all his charm, is still kind of stumbling through this too. And honestly, thank goodness. Flaws make characters human, remember?
Very much so. And that vulnerability is what ultimately forges their connection. By embracing imperfections in both themselves and each other, they create a bond that is resilient rather than idealized.
Exactly. That's why this story works. It's not about perfection, it's about choosing to risk. And maybe that's what love really is, the ultimate fall risk. Pun intended. All right, Elliot. Speaking of the ultimate fall risk, there's so much to unpack here. Beyond swoon-worthy moments and poetic declarations, let's talk about the deeper themes woven through this story. It's not just about bear spray and tree jokes, iconic as those are. What really resonated with you at a thematic level?
I do enjoy a metaphorical parfait. For me, it's the overarching theme of healing from past trauma. Abby Jimenez does such a remarkable job of showing what it takes to confront those invisible scars and rediscover a sense of security, both externally and emotionally.
Oh, totally. And it's not glossed over either, right? Like Charlotte's trust issues are so real. She's learning to let down her guard, or at least lower it a smidge, but it's a process. And Seth? Oh man, he's got some stuff to unpack too.
Yes, precisely. Seth's journey is particularly striking. He's fresh off a divorce, grappling with his own shortcomings and insecurities. There's this poignant sense that he, much like Charlotte, is a work in progress. It's that emotional growth, paired with their burgeoning trust, that really carries the story.
Exactly. And I love how it ties into the idea of taking risks in love. These two are so cautious, so like, nope, not happening. But then the universe basically locks them on that landing and says, try again. It's terrifying and beautiful to watch them inch out of their comfort zones.
Indeed, the risk is a double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, it's fraught with uncertainty. On the other, it holds the promise of something transformative. That balance, the willingness to leap despite potential heartache, is what makes their story so compelling.
Yes, and the redemption in Seth's arc? So satisfying. Like, here's a guy who could have just stayed closed off. But nope, he actively learns how to show up, to be better, for himself and for Charlotte. Ugh, I love a little character redemption, don't you?
Absolutely. It's both realistic and aspirational. Redemption, after all, isn't about perfection but about progress. A concept many readers will undoubtedly find relatable. Seth's willingness to grow mirrors. Charlotte's own journey creating a parallel dynamic that feels deeply authentic.
That's the thing. It's all so real, even with the quirky setup. People get stuck, they carry their baggage, but they also heal little by little. And that makes their love story not just sweet, but like empowering, you know?
Precisely. It's a testament to Jimenez's skill as a storyteller. Beneath the humour and whimsical premise lies a narrative that resonates on a profoundly human level. She lends weight to her character's challenges while crafting a hopeful, uplifting journey.
Honestly, I feel like this story isn't just a rom-com. It's almost a guide on how to stumble through life, embrace the mess, and take that leap of faith, even when it's scary. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to do?
I couldn't agree more. There's a subtle elegance in how the full risk illustrates that the most profound growth often comes from moments of discomfort. When we face our fears and take risks, the rewards, while not guaranteed, are often worth the fall.
And on that, I think we nailed the essence of this one. Key takeaway: life's messy, love's riskier, and if you can find someone to laugh with through it all, well, maybe that's every risk made worthwhile. Don't go anywhere, folks, because we're wrapping it all up next. All right, Elliot. I think we can both agree that The Fall Risk is more than just a rom-com. It's a real reminder of the beauty in taking chances, don't you think? Before we wrap up, I can't help but wonder, what takeaway do you think will really stick with our listeners?
Quite likely. It's been thoroughly enjoyable dissecting something so layered, yet delightfully humorous. Jimenez truly has a way of pulling you in, doesn't she?
Oh, completely. And like, how often do you find a story that's short, sweet, and still makes you think about, I don't know, trust, love, and trauma recovery, all while giggling at tree jokes?
Practically never, I'd wager. It's that rare literary comfort food. Wholesome yet surprisingly nourishing. If anything, I'd say the novella reminds us that sometimes it's worth taking the risk, even if the fall terrifies you.
Ugh, so well put. Okay, listeners, this is your nudge to grab a copy of The Fall Risk. We've popped an affiliate link in the description, so do us a solid and click away.
And while you're at it, Do let us know in the comments what you thought of the book, or if you have favourites you'd like us to explore in future episodes.
Yes, suggest all the books. We're always looking for our next obsession. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe, follow, or whatever button it is that keeps you coming back for more. Seriously, your support means the world to us.
Indeed it does. And for those seeking a light-hearted yet thoughtful escape, this novella will surely do the trick. It's been a pleasure sharing this literary adventure with you, Clara, as always.
Right back at you, Elliot. And everyone tuning in, thank you for spending your time with us. We can't wait to do it all again. Until then, happy reading, and maybe keep some bear spray handy, just in case.
Good advice for literature and life, I'd say. Take care, everyone.